Greenland looks like empty white space on a map until you zoom in. Because this frozen wasteland is the place a sitting U.S. president has said America must control whether they like it or not, even hinting he wouldn't rule out force. In Washington, some of his allies have even floated a bill to put Greenland on a path to becoming the 51st U.S. state. So why this island, and why now? Beneath the ice sheet and along its coast lies a three-layer story. Missiles, minerals, and a melting Arctic that's quietly rewriting the world map. Stay with this, because once you see Greenland through that lens, a 51st state of ice starts to look less like a joke, and more like a battle for the future balance of power. This isn't really a story about one politician's ego. It's about how a remote island the size of Mexico, with fewer people than a mid-sized American town, sits on the fault line between the US, Europe, Russia, China, and the global economy. If you keep watching, you'll see why the US has tried to buy Greenland before, why Trump revived the idea, and how the answer is buried in radar domes, shipping lanes, and the rare metals inside your phone. Because whoever shapes Greenland's future doesn't just gain a new flag on the map, they gain a new lever over war, trade, and climate in the 21st century. Trump's interest in Greenland sounded bizarre in 2019, but the idea was actually older than his presidency, and even older than the Cold War. In the late 1800s, after buying Alaska, U.S. strategists already saw Greenland as the next step in a chain of northern outposts. By 1946, President Harry Truman actually offered Denmark cash and territory in Alaska in exchange for Greenland. Denmark said no. So when Trump floated buying Greenland again, first privately in 2018, then publicly in 2019, he was picking up a file that had been sitting in Washington's bottom drawer for more than a century. The question is, what's in that file that makes this icy rock worth all the trouble? Start with the sky. In far northwestern Greenland, there's a lonely base, Pituffik Space Base, formerly Thule Air Base, the northernmost U.S. military installation on Earth. From here, giant radar dishes watch for missiles arcing over the Arctic from Russia and track satellites flying in polar orbit. This station plugs straight into America's early warning systems and missile defense network. In simple terms, if something is launched at North America over the shortest route, the Arctic, Greenland is one of the first places that will see it coming. So the first reason for wanting Greenland isn't a casino or a golf course. It's that control of Greenland tightens America's hand on the global nuclear clock. Now look down from space to the sea. Draw a rough triangle from Greenland to Iceland to the UK. That's the GIUK gap, a Cold War phrase that's suddenly back in fashion. Any Russian submarine trying to slip from the Arctic into the Atlantic has to cross this invisible gate. Greenland forms the western pillar of that gate, an enormous natural listening post for sonar, satellites, and patrol aircraft. And as climate change melts Arctic sea ice, new shipping routes are opening above Russia and Canada, making this region even more important for global trade. So beneath the ice, the hidden engine is strategic geography, a giant frozen aircraft carrier and radar platform anchoring the top of the world. But geography is only the first layer of the obsession. Take a shovel, at least hypothetically, and dig through the permafrost. Under the ice and rock, Greenland is loaded with critical minerals, rare earth elements, uranium, zinc, iron ore, and possibly major deposits of copper, graphite, and even oil and gas. Rare earths are the metals that make modern life work. Smartphones, EV motors, wind turbines, guided missiles. Right now, China dominates the mining and processing of these elements, which makes Washington nervous. So from an economic and security angle, Greenland looks like a backup vault, a way to reduce dependence on Chinese supply chains. But getting that treasure out is a lot harder than it looks on a map. Greenland is huge, empty, and brutally cold. There are almost no roads connecting towns. Ports are limited. Much of the coastline is locked in ice for part of the year. On top of that, Greenland's own government has put strict limits on oil and gas exploration, and local communities often resist mining projects, especially ones involving uranium. So even if the US owned Greenland on paper, it couldn't just flip a switch and unleash a resource boom. It would need decades of investment, infrastructure, and political trust with indigenous communities who have their own history and priorities. So why talk about a 51st state at all? Recently, some US politicians backing Trump's push have framed Greenland not just as a territory to buy, but as a potential new state, equal to Texas or California, with senators, representatives, and a star on the flag. For Trump, full ownership plus statehood is presented as the ultimate guarantee. No dependence on Denmark, no awkward treaties, just US law on US soil. It fits a pattern. He has argued that ownership gives power that leases and alliances never fully provide. But that's where the geopolitical fantasy runs straight into political reality on the ground in GIUK, Copenhagen, and Brussels. Cut from satellite maps to a small coastal town, colorful houses, fishing boats, kids walking to school in parkas. This is Greenlandic daily life. For most Greenlanders, the 51st state talk doesn't feel like opportunity. It feels like being talked about, not talked with. Greenland is an autonomous territory within the Kingdom of Denmark, with its own parliament, language, and a long-term dream of eventual independence, not of swapping Danish rule for American. Recent polls show overwhelming opposition in Greenland to any US takeover, and Danish leaders have dismissed the sail idea as absurd and unacceptable, doubling down on military spending to signal they're serious. So when Trump says anything less than US control is unacceptable, Greenlandic and Danish leaders hear something very simple: a distant superpower claiming a say over people who never asked for it. Here's where the story twists. Greenland is already covered by NATO's collective defense guarantee through Denmark. Attacking Greenland would trigger the same treaty that defends Berlin or Paris. Yet Trump has hinted that if forced to choose between Greenland and NATO, he might pick Greenland, and has openly suggested NATO allies are not pulling their weight. That puts European leaders in a strange spot, defending against Russia in the east, while nervously watching their own ally in the west talk about using all options, including military force, over a fellow NATO member's territory. The result is a new kind of Arctic tension, less about Russia planting flags on the seabed, and more about whether a long-standing alliance can survive one member trying to redraw the map. Even if Trump left office tomorrow and the 51st state bill died in Congress, the forces behind this story wouldn't go away. Arctic ice is retreating, opening new sea lanes that shave days off voyages between Asia, Europe, and North America. Greenland's coasts are becoming more accessible for shipping, fishing, and exploration. As that happens, whoever controls Greenland will shape how militaries patrol the Arctic, how data cables cross the seafloor, and how strict environmental rules are in one of the world's most fragile regions. So Trump's bid is dramatic, but it's also a loud version of a quieter trend: the race to lock in influence in the far north before the ice finishes melting. Trump and his supporters often frame Greenland as a race. Get there first, or watch China or Russia gain a foothold. China already calls itself a near-Arctic state, has invested in mining prospects in Greenland, and wants stable routes for its shipping and energy. Russia is rebuilding Arctic bases and sending more submarines under the ice. To US hawks, that's enough to justify bold, even risky moves. To US allies and many legal experts, it's a reminder that there are still rules: sovereignty, self-determination, and the idea that you can't just buy or threaten your way into someone else's homeland. How that tension gets resolved will say a lot about the kind of world we're heading into. So let's answer the question straight. Could Greenland really be America's next state? Legally, it would take at least 3 big steps. First, Denmark would have to agree to transfer sovereignty, or Greenland would have to become fully independent first. Second, Greenlanders themselves would almost certainly need to vote in favor. Third, the U.S. Congress would have to pass a statehood act, just as it did for Alaska and Hawaii. Right now, none of those pieces are in place. If anything, Trump's pressure has hardened opposition in both Denmark and Greenland. So in the near term, 51st state is more a symbol than a realistic roadmap, a way of expressing an ambition to turn a strategic partnership into outright ownership. Go back to that map of the Arctic one last time. Greenland is still mostly white. No highways, no megacities, just ice, rock, and scattered lights hugging the coast. But in the 21st century, emptiness can be power. The airspace you watch from, the sea lanes you anchor, the minerals you might one day dig up, these can matter more than crowded city-states in warmer latitudes. Trump's push to make Greenland a kind of 51st state reveals a deeper truth. The front line of global power is creeping north, and the island that once looked like a blank space on the map is turning into one of the world's most important decision points. In other words, Greenland isn't just where the ice is melting, it's where the next great argument about who owns the future is already underway. Before we go, if you enjoyed this story, subscribe to the channel and follow for more surprising stories about cities, history, and the facts that shape the world around us. What do you think about Greenland's role in global strategy? Would you ever want to visit? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.